Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Jans. I am the editor of Freedom with Writing and the co-founder of Writing Launch. Talk about how to break into professional blog writing. This is a free preview of our 3-week course called Break into Blog Writing. As many of you know, I created the popular blog Freedom with Writing. This blog gets hundreds of thousands of visitors in a year. Each time that I publish an article, I know it will be widely read with a very large audience. We have hundreds of thousands of email subscribers, over 300,000 fans on our Facebook page. In other words, this is a very successful blog. Freedom with Writing is actually how I make my living. I imagine many of you would like to have such a large audience for your writing. Now, there's 2 ways to go about that. There's the easy way and the hard way. I did it the hard way. I've spent well over 4 years and over $150,000 just building the audience for Freedom with Writing. And the vast majority of the work that I've done to build that audience does not involve writing. It's all about marketing and computer programming and all the various weird aspects of running a business. And that's something that I personally enjoy, and it can be wonderful, but it's not about the writing, at least not in my experience. And if you want to be a blogger who focuses on the writing, then I suggest that you actually take the easy way. And the easy way to get your writing in front of a large audience is all the hard work that people like me have done. What do I mean by that? Well, there are many, many blogs out there already with very large audiences. And instead of trying to copy their success, you can take advantage of their audience by writing articles for these already established blogs. You don't have to spend all that time and effort to build an audience. Instead, the shortcut to success as a professional blogger is to write for already established blogs and to get paid for that, because these blogs have built such a large audience. Many of them can pay surprisingly well for your writing. So that's what today's presentation is all about. And that's something Ian Chandler has done to great success. He's the co-founder of Writing Launch. He is a successful freelance writer. I actually met him because he pitched an article to Freedom with Writing, and I published that article, and our relationship developed quite well after that. And so he's also the instructor for our course, Break into Blog Writing. Here is Ian.
Thanks, Jacob. Hello, everybody. I'm glad you could make it, and I hope you're going to enjoy the webinar that we have ready for you today. What we did is we took our course, Break into Blog Writing, and we distilled it and made it into a short webinar it'll run about an hour or so. And we're going to tell you everything you need to know about how to get started in blog writing. This is what I personally do for a living as a freelance writer. I ghostwrite for several blogs, and I do also non-ghostwriting work for several blogs as well. And it's how I make all of my income pretty much, except for Writing Launch, of course. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about this topic and a lot of time learning about this topic, and it's something that I've learned a lot of things the hard way. And similar to what Jacob was saying, I can attest to the fact that starting up a blog is very difficult. I tried to start my own blog a couple years back and it failed. And the reason that it failed was because I didn't have the time or the resources or the money to get it off the ground. And I've seen much better success, and in fact, a breakthrough success with writing for other blogs. And in my opinion, I think it's the most lucrative option you can pursue as a freelance writer. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we'll also have a Q&A segment at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments or email them to us, and we'll respond to them as soon as we can after the webinar. So with that in mind, let's get started. So this is going to be a free preview of our course, Break into Blog Writing. something you might be thinking about is, why choose blog writing? Out of all the options that you have, why this? In my opinion, there are a few very good reasons that this is a great option for you. So just to clarify again, like Jacob said, we're going to be talking about becoming a regular blog writer for an already existing blog. So this is not going to be about, starting up your own blog. One of the reasons, and this is my #1 reason for choosing blog writing, is that it's a lucrative and flexible opportunity, and it has tons of room for growth. I have, over the course of my career as a blog writer, scaled up so much to the point where I'm getting paid now more than I have ever before, and it's enough to pay my bills and rent and get food and all of that good stuff. And I'm not done growing. I still have opportunities ahead of me. And I haven't been doing it for that long compared to a lot of other writers. And I think this success is easily replicable, and it's not just a one-off fluke. Another reason that I really like this blog writing option is that there are so many great blogs out there, and they pay writers well, and they need content. And you have no doubt experienced the struggle of trying to find writing jobs that pay well. You might be getting paid a couple cents per word, or a few bucks for a 500-word article, or whatever the case may be. Maybe you're at a content mill, and blogs, in my opinion, and from all the writers I've talked to and my personal experience, blogs are just so much better. They're so much higher quality. You can develop relationships with editors and other writers, like I did with Jacob, and it grew into something wonderful. And they really care about their content if it's a good blog, and there are so many out there, and we'll get to that later. But that's another reason that I think it's such a good option. And it's fun. I write about topics that I really enjoy. I do a lot of stuff about marketing because that's what I know, and that's what I have the most experience in. And I also write about freelancing sometimes, ironically. But you can often, choose your niche and what blogs you write for. If you're writing, on a freelancing platform like Upwork, or if you're on a content mill like Textbroker or whatever, or Constant Content, you don't really get to choose what you work on, and you don't have a lot of control over your career. And with blog writing, it's exactly the opposite. You have a large amount of control in most cases, and that flexibility adds just a level of fun that is not present when you have to write for other people who are choosing what you're going to write and giving you no say in it. So if that's persuaded you, let's talk about starting out as a blog writer. So what do you do if you want to start, dip your toes in the waters of blog writing? The first question you really have to ask is blog writing for me? It's a simple question, but you really do need to ask it, because blog writing is not the perfect writing job for every freelance writer. And I'll explain that. For example, you have to write consistently under deadlines. These deadlines can be as tight as a few thousand words in a day, or a couple hundred words every week, but there's always some sort of deadline, and it requires a bit more organization than what you might be used to. You also have to thoroughly research your topics. A lot of times I have to do so much research that I spend as much time researching as I do writing, and sometimes I do even more researching than I do writing. So it can be that intense depending on the topic that you choose or that you're assigned. You may also have to do some additional work. Now, this sounds a little intimidating, but it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. So for example, a lot of blog writers have to find pictures, images, graphics, videos, stuff like that for the article. Other writers have to do what's known as SEO, or specifically keyword optimization, which is where you take a keyword and you make sure to include it so many times in the text. That's not so common with blogs. Finding media is very common, so you do have to spend a little bit more time doing stuff that's not writing. It requires a lot of self-motivation and a really good sense of time and task management. If you don't have those, your projects will quickly fall apart and you'll lose track of what's what. And you may be assigned topics to write on and given very light instructions, so you have to fill in the blanks. Sometimes you might just get a title that you have to write 2,000 words based off of that. Other times you might, get a short outline and have to sort of fill in the rest. So it really does vary, but that also means there's a lot of room for your creativity to come through and shine. So it's both a positive and a negative in some ways. But these are just a few of the aspects about being a blog writer that I wanted you to be aware of right off the bat. And if you're still having trouble deciding, we're going to throw in a bonus resource for you. It's the first day of the course, so it's the exact material that you'll get when you sign up for the course. So when you sign up for the course and you get to day one, this is exactly what you'll see. It's just a short module called Is Blog Writing for You, and it helps you decide if this is the sort of career that you want to pursue as a writer. And I try to be as comprehensive as I can. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions you have on it. But I really think this resource will help you decide whether or not this is something you want to pursue. So let's say you do want to pursue being a blog writer. How do you find blogs to write for? This is usually one of the biggest questions that we get in relation to writing for blogs or pitching blogs. The trick is to look for medium level blogs. Now, I've pitched tons of blogs out there. I've pitched, little no-name blogs that I don't even remember. I've pitched places like The Atlantic, and I've also pitched more mid-level places like The Penny Hoarder, a blog you might have heard. And what I found is that the lower level and higher level blogs, that is, the really high budget blogs and the really low budget blogs are not where the money is at. And that's just because small blogs often really can't afford to pay writers. They barely have the budget to, have a domain name and space on the internet and advertising and all of that. Large blogs often don't pay writers because their excuse is that they provide exposure. And you've heard that saying, artists die of exposure. And that's very true for freelance writers as well. So small blogs and large blogs are really not where it's at. For example, blogs like the Huffington Post don't pay. And a lot of writers think that, getting a byline in a large blog like that looks really good. But in my experience, if you can just prove that your writing is valuable, you don't need to be in, any big blog or magazine out there. But that's a bit of a digression, but I just wanted to emphasize that medium level blogs are really where the money is in terms of blog writing. They're the ones that pay well. So what you want to look for when you're looking at a medium level blog, you want to look at this blog and see if they have multiple bylined authors. So that means that, every author gets their own little bio section or just even just a byline. And you want to make sure that there are lots of bylined authors, at least, 5 to 10, I would say, if not more. And this just shows that they have a rotating roster of writers that are writing for them. Lots of comments is also a good sign, just because obviously if there's lots of buzz surrounding the blog, that means it's got to be a pretty popular blog. Positive press is also something that you want to be aware of and look for. So, if this blog has been featured on another blog or linked to by other blogs, that's a really good sign of it being a credible blog that's probably making enough to pay its writers. Now, there are some other techniques that I like to use that are way more direct, and these are just Google search techniques. So the idea is, you open up Google and you type in these formulas and you kind of fill in the blanks, and they allow you to find blogs in your niche that pay well. And these are super simple. So we're going to use an example of your niche being writing. So let's say you write about writing. You could enter this string of this little piece of a formula into Google. So this whole thing would go into Google. Just, a left quotation mark, writing, right quotation mark, space, plus sign, space, quotation mark, guest post, quotation mark. That whole thing goes into the Google search bar. And what that tells Google is to give you back results that have both of those exact phrases. So this is really good for finding blogs that advertise or publicize that they accept guest posts. And then there are some other formulas that you can use, writing or whatever your niche is, plus writer's guidelines, submission guidelines, Write for Us. These are other names for the writer's guidelines page, which we'll talk about later. But these are all good ways of finding blogs that accept guest articles, and that's what you're looking for. And like I said, these go into the search bar as is with quotation marks on the plus sign. So now I want to talk about some key components that come into play when you're looking at blogs to pitch to. The first thing, and I cannot stress the importance of this enough, is the writer's guidelines page. So like I said, this is also known as the submission guidelines page, the Write for Us page. It has a bunch of different names. It might say editorial guidelines, but you'll know it when you see it. And this is an incredibly important page. If you're not familiar with this type of page, it's basically just a page on a website that outlines everything specifically that the blog is looking for in an article. So that includes stuff like word count, how they pay, what topics they accept, how often they accept articles. It usually goes into extreme detail. And what you want to do, if you really want to get published and paid well for it, is to read these very thoroughly and very carefully. And the reason I say that is because I know it seems obvious, but so many writers don't do that. It's amazing how many writers just do not read the submission guidelines. And sometimes, blogs get articles that aren't even in the same niche as they are. So if you just read the writer's guidelines all the way through, you're already ahead of most of your competition, believe it or not. Yeah, like I said, they tell you exactly what the publication is looking for. It spells it out for you, and then you can formulate a pitch around that. And you may get your pitch rejected if you don't read the guidelines, because editors can tell usually within seconds if you've read the guidelines or not. So that will really show in your pitch. So you want to make sure that you've read these, a few times through all the way. And they will also tell you if a publication pays or not. So if you're looking around and you see a blog on a lot of lists about, places to submit your writing, but you're not sure if it pays or not, look at the writer's guidelines, and it will tell you if a publication pays and how much they pay, and it will have all that sort of payment and legal and procedural information that you need. Yeah, they'll tell you how much the blog pays and how they do. So some blogs, like to pay by check, other ones pay by PayPal. It varies, but the guidelines will elucidate that for you. And that brings up another point, and that's payment is crucial. Obviously, you don't want to work for peanuts, so you want to make sure that your rate that you're getting paid is good. So you want to, take some time, figure out if what this blog is paying is really worth your time for the given amount of work. So you need to calculate how much work is involved. For example, do you have to find other media, do some keyword stuff, conduct research, or any other tasks? Because if you do, you want to figure that in to the rate. So if a blog is offering $100 for a 500-word article, you want to find out if that's really worth your time, because you have to keep in mind that you're not going to just be doing writing in most cases. Sometimes you'll be doing just writing and the blog will take care of everything else for you. But I would say the majority of the time you're doing other tasks, specifically finding images and videos and stuff like that, and doing research. And more involved articles should pay more. So this is why places like Scientific American will pay more because they like longer articles, and they will pay for that quality. Now, this is a resource that I am extremely excited about, and it's one that I wish that I had starting out, because I spent hours and hours looking for different blogs to pitch to, and I didn't pitch to the best ones. So what we've done is we've taken some of the best blogs on the internet and put them all into this compendium of it's a guidebook, the paid publishing guidebook to be exact, and we have in this 438 publications that pay for writing. So this includes a lot of blogs. There are some magazines and other types of publications. There are so many blogs, hundreds in this guidebook, and we're going to be sending it to you for free. And it's a massive resource, and even if you don't end up doing blog writing as a career, or even if you don't pursue it, this is a resource that you'll want to have around. Trust me, you'll want to have it on your desktop so you can reference it quickly, because it's a massive list of all of these publications. So we're going to be sending that to you directly to your email for free in the next coming days. And if you are pursuing blog writing, that's really going to help you find the kind of blogs that you want to pitch to. So we have contact information, rate information, categorized by niche, all of that good stuff. And I think you're really going to like it. So with that in mind, let's say you found a blog, and maybe you already have one or two or five in mind. How do you pitch them? Now, we've done webinars on pitching before, and you can check those out on our YouTube channel. But if you are interested in a shorter, more distilled version, I have that prepared. And there are some things that are specific to pitching blogs. So for example, ideally, you want to be a reader of the blog. When I first pitched Jacob for an article for Freedom with Writing, I had already been reading the blog for quite some time. I was familiar with it. I knew what type of content they published. And that really helped me get my foot in the door. And you should do the same thing. And at the very least, you should read 5 to 10 articles from the blog, because that'll give you an idea of what the blog publishes. And when you read them, you don't want to just read them. You want to analyze them. Look at them in terms of content and style. So in terms of content, what are these articles about? How specific are they? What is the depth of content that this blog is putting out? And then in terms of style, you want to think about the kind of writing voice that's at work. Is it casual? Is it formal? Somewhere in between? How are the articles structured? Are they very involved, lots of headings? Are they more casual with just a few? It's things like this that you want to be thinking of. And you don't want to, overanalyze it too much, but you do want to put some serious time and consideration into thinking about how these blogs work and how the articles look. And doing all this is going to give you a very solid knowledge of what topics the blog publishes, what they are looking for in articles, and who the audience is. And you need to know all 3 of those things if you want to get published, because that's what any good editor will look for. So after you've done that, when you have a blog in mind, then I do recommend just focusing on one blog at a time. You want to brainstorm anywhere from 5 to 15 article ideas as a rough range. And that just ensures that you have a lot of ideas to work with. And then ask yourself, could you realistically see the blog publishing these articles? Because sometimes in the past I've come up with ideas that I think are great, and then I ask myself, okay, will this blog, could this actually be on this blog? Like, can you imagine it as a headline on the blog's homepage? And sometimes when I've done that, I've realized that I came up with maybe a good article idea, but it's for the wrong blog. So you really want to make sure that your article ideas are fitting for the blog in question. And a good way to do that is just to compare them to articles that the blog has already published. Are they similar yet different? So, are they about a similar topic or theme, but are they different enough to warrant publication? So an example is Freedom with Writing, a blog you're all familiar with. You probably know the type of content that will be published there. For example, there's an existing article that's called 7 Magazines That Pay Writers $150 or More Per Article. So with that knowledge, you could take that and create something that's similar but different. So you could do an article like 9 trade publications that pay $200 or more per article. So it's the same sort of formula, but it's with a different focus that hasn't been covered yet. And I actually think that has been covered now. But you could do any sort of thing. You could do 9 pet publications that pay $50 or more per article or something like that. So the whole idea is just to take ideas that the blog already has, themes and topics, and think about what it hasn't covered yet, or think about ways in which it hasn't covered topics. And that's what I mean by the whole similar yet different thing. And it's definitely a tough line to toe, but if you put some time into it, it will really pay off, and your article ideas will be a lot better for it. And you also want to think about which article would best satisfy the blog's readers. And you can even see if the blog readers are asking for or talking about specific topics or articles. You can go in the comments section, see what the readers are talking about. Go on their Facebook or their Twitter or whatever, and look at all these comments that people are making and see if if they want anything covered. If the readers, because ultimately an editor wants to make the readers happy. So if you consult the readers sort of indirectly by seeing their comments, that'll give you a wealth of information to play with when you're thinking about new ideas to pitch. Finally, you want to settle on one or two ideas and pitch those. And you just pitch like you would for a print publication. Like I said, we have other webinars on pitching that you can see on our YouTube channel. And in brief, you want to start with just a short intro. I usually do just one sentence. Pitch your story in 1 to 2 concise paragraphs. I usually do about 2 to 3 sentences each. I think that's a good light amount. And then I always end with a question because that creates a dialogue between you and the editor. And then after about a week or two, you want to follow up if you haven't gotten a response. Depending on the size of the blog, you'll want to wait either less or more. So if it's a smaller blog that doesn't have a lot of a following, then about a week is good. If it's a bigger blog that does have a larger following, maybe 2.5 weeks is more the range you're looking at to follow up. But if you haven't gotten a response, you definitely want to follow up, because a polite, well-timed follow-up can really mean the difference between publication and rejection. A lot of times what happens is that pitches just slip through the cracks because editors' email inboxes are so full, it's crazy, and they don't have a lot of time to comb through all these emails. So if you if you send a follow-up, maybe the editor will, they might even just see your post or your pitch for the first time, or they might be seeing it for the second time, and then you'll stick in their mind. So it's really a great idea to follow up if you haven't heard back. And to help you with this, we're going to be sending a third and final bonus, which is a road-tested pitch template. Now, this is a pitch template that I have personally used to get paid and published. I found that this formula just worked. I tried a lot of different kinds of pitches. Starting out, I did really, really long and drawn-out pitches. And looking back, they don't look so good. So I refined it and streamlined it and found a template that I found worked the majority of the time. So I guarantee that this will help you improve your pitches, and it might even get you paid and published. And that's the goal of this, and I think you're going to like this as well. So that concludes the lecture part of the webinar, if you will. And now we're going to open it up to a Q&A section. If there's anything that you need more clarification about or anything that we didn't cover, go ahead and ask it in the comments. We're going to get to as many questions as possible. And if you just have any general thoughts, feel free to either comment it or email us, and we'll always be happy to talk. And yeah, we're going to cover as many questions as we can right now, and I hope it'll be really informative for you.
Ian, do you want to start by talking about how often a writer should be sending out pitches? Like, how does a writer know how many pitches to be sending out?
That's a very good question. I think it varies depending on sort of how much time you have and also how many blogs you have in mind. I've read some articles that kind of maintain that you should always be pitching, and I think that's a good mindset to get into, because the more you pitch, obviously the higher success rate you'll have, just because you're going to so many blogs. So I think it's a good mindset to just try to pitch as much as possible. So if this is something that you want to do, you want to regularly be reading blogs, thinking of new article ideas, writing them down, even if you think they suck, because they might be able to be refined later on, and you'll get some little nuggets of gold along the way. So what I usually do is if I'm actively pitching, I do anywhere from 2 to 10 pitches a week, just depending on how many blogs I'm looking at and the ideas I have, and all of those factors kind of play into that.
Thank you. So if you have any questions at all, anyone, please ask them in the Facebook comments. You can also send us an email at support@writinglaunch.com. We are here to answer any and all of your questions. Someone did have a question about PayPal. How important is having a PayPal account for freelance blogging?
This is an interesting topic because, obviously you want to get paid securely for your blogging work. So usually, before I get into that, I just will touch on kind of how you get paid. For most writing that you do, so like if you work with a client or something, you always want to get paid up front. But with blogs, it's the other way around. You submit, a pitch and then an article, and then you get paid. And how you get paid is sort of the tricky part, because unfortunately PayPal is the de facto standard for lots of blogs. Other blogs pay by check, and a lot of blogs will pay by check on request. So I think it's unfortunately fairly important to have a PayPal account, just because it's so ubiquitous that everyone uses it. There are other blogs that I've used that pay through or have the option to pay writers through lesser known payment processors, but PayPal is just sort of the standard, and it's not my favorite. I dislike it for a lot of reasons, but I have to have one. It's a necessary evil, and that's sort of how I view it for getting paid for your blog writing. But like I said, a lot of blogs do still pay by check, but I think PayPal is pretty much the standard for a lot of blogs out there, unfortunately.
Jimmy Kelly asked, how many blogs do you typically write for per week? What's a good number to do when starting out?
So this is asking about writing and not pitching?
I think he's trying to figure out how much writing a new blogger or an established blogger should be doing for the different websites to have a decent career in the different stages of the career.
It depends on so many factors. It depends on the length of the articles, the intensity of the articles, how many articles you can get. I would say, if you're just doing one article a week to start off with, I think that's fine. I think the ideal range to be in is 2 through 4, like 2, 3, or 4. And the reason is because no matter what the length is, that's generally a good amount to kind of, reach a nice weekly quota, but then not get burnt out. And of course, if you do shorter articles, you can take on more. If you do longer articles, you might just want to stay on the lower, end of that spectrum. But I think that's a pretty good way to start. Of course, I think another answer is just, as many as you can do without getting burnt out. And word count really plays into that, because anymore, a lot of blogs are going after long form content. So we're talking, 2,000 plus words, and that's usually what I do. And I usually get in, 4 to 5 articles a week. On a really good week, I get 5. So it all depends on how long the blogs are, and just the kind of assignments and topics that you get.
I think this really ties in nicely with a question from Colleen Bedford. Do you fully research the article before you pitch it, or do you pitch the ideas and then research it later?
That's a good question. Usually what I will do is, if I'm pitching a blog, if I just have an idea and I want to pitch a blog, I do some light research before pitching. Sometimes I do just pitch the article idea and then research it later, but I try to do as much research as I can before pitching, so that I have a better idea of, is this article going to be long enough? Is it going to be good enough? Is it going to be detailed enough? So I would definitely recommend, if you can, doing like, a little bit of research, maybe 10-20 minutes of research, even maybe less depending on the topic. before you send in the idea, just because that'll give you a more well-rounded idea of what you're talking about and what the finished article will look like. But yeah, that's a really good question.
How much impact does a LinkedIn profile have?
I think it varies because, for example, for me, I have a LinkedIn, but it's never gotten me any sort of opportunity. And it really, I don't think a lot of people look at it, but it is nice to have. So my opinion would just be, definitely create one because it never hurts. And I keep it regularly updated. Like I might go on, once a month to update it. And that way you'll always have sort of an updated business card that's online that anyone can look at. So I definitely think it's valuable, but I personally don't use it as like a method of networking. That's definitely something that a lot of people do, and a lot of people have success with that. So if you're a very, if you like networking and you're that type where you're constantly looking for opportunities and to build relationships, I think LinkedIn is a great place to be. But even if you're not, I think it is worth the time to just have that up online, because a lot of editors will look for a writer that has a web presence. And that could mean, a site of your own, or even just, some social profiles like LinkedIn or a portfolio. I think a portfolio and a LinkedIn are the two most important things you can have, followed by a website for yourself. But I think you can't go wrong with any of those. I mean, they're all going to be good for your career in some way.
As an editor, I can say that a LinkedIn profile isn't necessary, but there are times where I've found it to be useful to look at a potential writer's LinkedIn profile. They can show a bit of credibility, or they can show a track record in a niche so that it shows that they do have expertise in the topic that they're writing about, and that can be useful. So think about how an editor might be viewing your LinkedIn profile and how it might show your credibility as a writer to that editor. And that's something that I have found helpful when writers have a good LinkedIn profile. Another question, Janice Torres asked, do contracts come into play?
This is another really good question. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And this is a little strange to me because I think that if I had it my way, every blog would have a contract, just because I think it it does the writer a favor. It protects both parties. But some blogs don't use contracts. A lot of times you will get a contract in the form of what might be called a writer's agreement, or something to that extent, and you'll just fill it out, read through it, make sure it's hunky-dory. But some blogs just do a more informal thing where there's no contract involved. You just pitch the article, send them the article, and then get paid. Now with that, if a blog doesn't have a contract in place, if that's not a part of their system, you definitely want to make sure that they're that they have a good reputation, that they actually pay their writers, that they have a good track record. But a lot of blogs will use contracts, and I think that's great. So it just varies from blog to blog, and that's the thing about blog writing, is that there are so many little variables that we've sort of brought all this up, like from payment to contracts to how to pitch and stuff like that. There's all these little puzzle pieces, and every blog is a little different in the way that they do things. So it really forces you to kind of learn on your feet and think on your feet. And with that said, I think it's a great learning experience. So to come around back to the question, yes and no, basically. But I think a contract is a good sign of a good blog. But if a blog doesn't have a contract, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to pay you. So it's worth your time to do some research on the blog, and see if they pay writers or not.
Kartika Karma Katira asks, do companies accept articles or blogs from overseas? And as the editor of Freedom with Writing, I can say that just off the top of my head, I can think of writers from at least 5 countries that I've hired. And really the primary factor is not where the writer is from, but the quality of the writing. And I think that's one of the great things about freelance writing and writing for blogs is, in general, it's all about the quality of the writing that you get, and the editors, as long as they're able to send you payment, which is kind of one of the issues with PayPal. If you can have a PayPal account, then that opens so many doors. If you can accept payment, then most editors just want your writing and they'll pay you well for it, just as though you're from any other country. So I would say yes, most companies, most blogs do accept articles from overseas. Ian, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think you summed that up perfectly.
So Megan asks, how much time would you expect a 500-word article to take to complete? She's trying to figure out how to calculate pay in relation to hours of work.
That's very timely, because we're going to be publishing an article very soon, a little resource, if you will, on freelance writing rates. So that will be coming to you in the near future, and that talks more about, you know, hourly stuff and per word stuff and all that. But for this specific example, 500 words. Again, it depends on the topic, how much else you have to do. If it's just, you know, 500 words on a, you know, a standard topic like, you know, maybe food or something like that, I would usually expect a completion time of anywhere from half an hour to an hour, I would say. And I think I usually average about 500 to 700 words per hour. And that's a good benchmark, I think, to shoot for, just because that keeps you, you know, productive enough to where you're moving through a lot of writing throughout the day and throughout your week, but you're not, you know, skimping on quality. You're not, you know, rushing or, you know, having all these typos in your work. But it really just depends on, you know, how much other work you're doing. If you have to find images, if you have to do a lot of research, that takes more time. But for the actual writing, I would say, you know, 30, 45 minutes to an hour-ish.
For me personally, I'm sometimes surprised at how quickly I can just write an article. I can write a really high quality 500-word article in about 20 minutes if I know the content in and out. So this is something that really, as Ian said, it really depends on so many factors. And I think for freelance writers, that's part of your job, is over time you have to learn these things for your own situation and the niche that you're writing in and your various goals. So I don't think there's really like one answer to that question.
Yeah, and I also think that for this specific example of 500 words, I actually think in many ways that word count is just no longer sort of in play, because almost every writing job that I've looked at, they want articles of at least 1,000 words, if not, you know, more. And most blogs are, you know, moving, like I said, toward longer articles of 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 words. And that's just because, you know, it's harder to stand out today. It's harder than ever before. So a lot of blogs want to publish really comprehensive content that covers all the bases. And that's hard to do in 500 words, because compared to, you know, a 4,000-word article, a 500-word article just looks sort of like a table of contents. So I would definitely say get used to the idea of writing for longer. But if you find shorter articles, like Jacob said, you can often just crank them out, you know, if you really know the niche well, and if you've done it for a while. It takes, like you said, 20, 30 minutes, short as that.
Kimmy asks, hi there, I've been a writer for 4 years, and there are times when I completely run out of ideas to pitch for blogs. I'm just like, I don't know what to write about anymore. Where do you find inspiration and creativity to revitalize your pitching process?
That's a good question. I personally think that creativity has little to nothing to do with it, because once you get into the process of idea generation, you're dealing with something that I think is a lot more mechanical. So what I'm about to share is actually another kind of secret from the course, but I'm going to share it with you guys because I think it's important and it's relevant to the question. What we recommend in the course is this idea of becoming an idea machine. So what we recommend is writing down at least 10 ideas per day. And it doesn't matter how bad they are. Just write them down, whenever you get, and whenever an idea pops into your head. There are lots of articles online that talk about, carrying stuff with you, like whether that's your phone or a physical notebook, like a memo pad and a writing utensil. You want to have something to record your ideas with at all times. And if you just churn out enough ideas, if you just have a sheer enough volume of ideas, you'll eventually, run into some good ideas. With that said, I think you have to also complement that with reading a lot, because the more you read, the more good ideas you will have. So, for example, since I had read Freedom with Writing for a long time before I pitched, I had a great idea of what kind of content they published, and I was able to think of, new ideas that would bring value to them. So I'd say it's a mixture of both those things, just coming up with a bunch of ideas, even if they're bad, and just sorting through them later on, and then really analyzing the blog that you're looking at and saying, okay, what kind of ideas could I think of that could provide value to this blog and to its readers?
One technique that I know about, I don't remember who said this, but he's a rather famous person, and he has a daily habit where every day he comes up with 10 of the worst ideas he can think of. And that idea of having a habit of intentionally coming up with bad ideas takes the pressure off of the idea generation process, and it makes it so much more fun. And that's another technique that I've found can be really valuable, is just intentionally coming up with bad ideas. And then from there, you might discover that, hey, one of those is not so bad after all. So Jimmy asked, how long do meetings typically take a decision on your pitch?
Can you repeat that question?
How long do medium level blogs take to make a decision on your pitch?
Okay, sorry, it kind of cut off for a minute. I think Jacob will have a better answer to this probably than I will. In my experience, it's been anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks. It's usually not longer than 2 weeks, because if that's the case, then it's safe to assume that the editor forgot about it. But I think most blogs will reply in that 1 to 2 week range, so you're not looking at waiting for a long time. And Jacob, you probably have something to add to that, I would wager.
In general, there's a few things I would look at. I would look at how often the blog publishes an article. I would look at how many writers that they work with. What you're trying to figure out in terms of how long it takes is how busy the editor is and how often they spend the time responding to articles. And every editor does it a little differently. So some might once a month go through their backlog. Others might look at it every day. Some might just do it off and on throughout the week. So there isn't one way that an editor will go through and decide. There's not one timeline for any blog, but in general, I would say that Ian's right. About 2 weeks covers most bases, and being forgiving of an editor's time, I think, is really important, because they are usually very busy and overworked, and they have so much information and so many emails that being as polite as possible and punctual when they're not able to be punctual, that's something that can really help you develop a good relationship with editors. So that is my answer. Kartika asks, are articles and blogs the same?
That's a good question. For all intents and purposes, they're interchangeable. However, articles are generally used to refer to longer pieces, so we're talking in that that 1,000-word or more range, and then you have this idea of the blog post, which is a more sort of informal, casual thing that's maybe 300, 500, 700 words. But I think you can use either term interchangeably as just a catch-all for just articles or online writing in general. That's anywhere from 300 to 3,000 words or even more.
We have another question. How do you check the reputation of a company before working with them? If you want to make sure that they're legit and they will pay you, how do you do that?
A few of the ways that you can are the ways that I touched on earlier in the webinar about seeing if they have a good readership, if they're getting a lot of positive press, if they have a lot of bylined authors. And aside from that, there are some other things that you can do that I think are just as important. One thing I always do when I'm pitching to a new blog is I just look at the blog, and I consider everything from the design to the actual content of the blog. And I think 9 times out of 10, that will tell you if something's up or not. I also do a quick Google search on the blog and make sure that it has a good track record. And there's also this great site called whopayswriters.com that chronicles all the blogs that pay writers, and I think it has payment information on there as well. And that doesn't cover every blog ever, but I think a lot of the blogs that you'd want to pitch will be on that site. And you can always just look on freelance writing forums and search in Google, like, does this blog pay? Or even just ask about it. If you have other writers that or if you're in communities, or if you can find communities, that's a great way if you can't find anything about this blog. But I think generally just looking at the blog, reading their content, seeing what Google says about them is more than enough to determine if they're legitimate or not. And I've done that, and I've never gotten burned in terms of doing blog writing.
How do you deal with requests for writing samples if you're just starting out?
So I think there are a couple of ways in which this could play out. And it really depends on the length of the writing sample. Something that I see so much, and this is more common in job postings and not really like writers guidelines pages. So like not a lot of blogs will do this. But in a lot of job postings, they will ask for a writing sample, and sometimes they'll ask for an entire article or even multiple articles, and other times it'll just be a few paragraphs or something like that. And I think a good general rule of thumb is to never give any samples under any circumstances. That said, with that mindset in mind, there are some slight allowances you can make. For example, one of the best jobs that I got, I had to submit a writing sample for, and it was just a 2-sentence writing sample because the job was for doing product descriptions. So I had to give a sample product description, and I came up with it in a minute or less. So if worst case scenario, if that got ripped off, I only was out a minute of my life. But if you're talking about a whole article or not, or a whole article or 2 articles, I would definitely not do that. And the one time that I did that, I actually got ripped off, and the articles just taken from me, and I never got any word from this person back. I never found them online. They're not online anywhere. So I guess they didn't end up using them, but it just goes to show, the danger of sending in samples, because in freelance writing circles, there's sort of this little funny maxim that says that if someone's requesting writing samples, that means they want free work. And I think that's by and large true, unfortunately. So like I said, a good rule of thumb is just to never do writing samples. That said, if it's like a sentence or like a small paragraph that you can knock out in a couple minutes, then I think that is okay. But with all of that said, none of the blogs that I've written for have ever asked for a writing sample. If they have, it's either been they either want to look at my portfolio, or they just don't ask for samples because I will always link my portfolio anyway, and then how you write your pitch is actually a really big indicator of whether or not an editor will work with you. So if your pitch is, if it's really studied, and if you've practiced it a lot and you've put a lot of thought into it, the editor will be able to tell. If you've just thrown it together and it's, a canned pitch that you've just sent en masse to all these blogs, they will be able to tell that as well. So I think those are kind of all over the place thoughts, but I think that maybe more fully answers the question, and I hope it helps.
So when you submit an article to a blog, who owns that article?
This information will also be in the writer's guidelines. For example, it was actually an email newsletter that I wrote for. I wrote an article for this newsletter, and they buy just the first publication rights, and then after that you can resell the article with credit that it was originally published here. But I think in most cases the blog will own the article. Well, with that said, I think republishing articles is not really a popular option, and it's not really one that a lot of blogs will accept. Blogs want content that is just for them and that will only appear exclusively on their site. They don't want their viewers going somewhere else. So for that reason alone, I think it just doesn't happen that much. But definitely check the writer's guidelines, because there should be copyright and ownership information in there. And if you have any questions, by all means ask the editor. They're there to help, and they'll answer as many questions as they can.
I think this relates to another really important point: is what is your goal with working with the blog and the blog editor? Do you want to just have this one article that gets published by them, or is your goal to become a regular contributor to that blog? Because if you want to really cultivate that relationship, you're not going to be thinking in terms of the individual articles, but how you can build a relationship with an editor so you can continue to write an article for them on a regular basis every week or every month. And so thinking about that long-term relationship as your perspective in terms of working with the article, as opposed to thinking about just the article, I think changes how you think about that kind of question, where the goal isn't necessarily to make the most from each individual article, but to develop that relationship with the editor in the long term, which in the end will benefit your career in my experience. We have a lot more questions, but we are running out of time. So Bonnie asks, concerning evergreen content, is it a good practice to repost, for instance, using Twitter? After the initial post, is it poor taste to repost a blog at all, even though a different caption pertaining to the content is used for the same link?
I think that is actually a really good idea. And that's something that I've seen a lot of really popular bloggers do. And by no means should it be a frequent thing, but if you write an evergreen piece and maybe 2, 3, even 6 months down the road you want to share it, by all means do so. And you can do it regularly if you want. You just run the risk of people saying, hey, I've seen this before. But other than that, I think it is a really good technique to drive more traffic to that piece of content that you're writing.
That is something we do at Freedom with Writing. Is we try not to overwhelm people with the same content, but in my experience, if people like an article, 6 months down the line, they might want to see it again, or maybe they didn't see it before. Half the audience might have seen it the first time, but not the other half. So you want to reach more people. And I've never had anyone complain about encountering a good article. So, and unless you're sending it out every day, if you space it out enough, then that can only be a good thing. If it's a good article, people will be happy. Fasamad Ali, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. He asked, after taking this 3-week course, will I be able to get blog posts accepted?
Well, that's certainly the goal. The way we've put the course together is I've taken all of the information that I know about blog writing and distilled it into this course. So I'll give you a quick preview of it. It's a 3-week course, so it's not super long, but it's it's enough to keep you busy for a while and to keep you informed. And there's a lot of content that you can, keep coming back to. And it covers a lot of the topics that we've talked about and some that we haven't, like how to find great blogs that pay well. We go into even more detail in the course. How to get your foot in the door as a regular blog writer. So we talk about establishing relationships and talking with editors and things like that. And we even talk about how to analyze different blogging styles and how to apply them to your writing so that you can sort of emulate the content that you see and then have a better chance of getting published and then developing relationships with these editors. So it's a really in-depth course, and I've been doing this for years, and I've learned a lot just from doing this on my own. I didn't read about it anywhere. I just learned it. I learned how to talk to editors the right way. I learned how to pitch well. So this is all of that experience just directly to you, because I want to help you shorten that time that you spend trying to get to where you want to be. And that's our goal at Writing Launch, really, is just to, give you none of the BS and all of the good stuff. And we go into much more. I mean, it's 3 solid weeks of lesson after lesson, and it's all with the goal of being able to get you published. So we talk about pitching, we talk about talking to editors, we talk about finding the right blog for you, all of that stuff. So we obviously can't guarantee any results, but we can guarantee that you will come out of the course with a lot more knowledge and a lot more confidence in your pitching and blog writing capabilities. So with all of that said, if you're interested in the course, we will be opening it up soon. And we're opening the class to only 30 members. The way we do things at Writing Launch is, we build a small community, as small as we can, but big enough to where a good enough amount of people can join in, because we like to give direct feedback. We like to interact with members, have discussions, answer questions, things like that, be there for support constantly. And if we have a lot of members, we just can't do that. So we like to keep it small. So if you're one of the 30 people to sign up for the course, you'll be enrolled in the class, and you'll be able to take the 3-week course and get direct support from us, have discussions, extra resources, all of that good stuff. And this is going to be the last time for a while that we're going to open enrollment for the class. So we're keeping it limited. This is information that is tried and true. It's stuff that I have just taken directly from my career and written it down. There's no fluff. There's no BS, like I said. It has none of that filler that you might find in other writing resources, because you don't have time for that and you don't deserve that. So we're going to keep it small, 30 people. We're going to keep it limited. And if you're interested, enrollment is going to open this Friday on October 6th. So with that in mind, I really recommend this course if you're interested in blog writing. And the bonus that we'll send out this week on Is Blog Writing for You, that will help you gauge if this is something that you want to do. And if it is, I think this course will help you get the knowledge that you need to become more confident in your pitching skills, become more confident in your writing capabilities and how you talk to editors and all of the stuff that you need to know. So it's a short enough course, but it also goes into plenty of detail. So if you like that, the idea of that, enrollment opens this Friday and 30 people only. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a priority wait list. So if you sign up for this wait list, you'll be the first to be notified about when the course is open for enrollment. So if you want to do that, you can go to writinglaunch.com, and right on our homepage there is the link to sign up for the wait list. And I recommend doing that even if you're just a little interested in the course, because with only 30 spots, we expect to sell out pretty quickly. But we hope that everyone who really wants to get in can get in. And I think it's going to be a really good experience. Like I said, we like to answer questions directly. We email our members a lot. We have discussions on the lessons. We talk about everything under the sun that related to writing and blogging. And I put a lot of effort into this course, and like I said, it's directly from my career. This is not speculation, this is not theory, this is actionable, road-tested stuff, and I guarantee that you'll come out of the course with more confidence, more knowledge, and hopefully you'll get paid and published, and that is ultimately the goal. And we will always, help as much as we can. So yeah, if you're, like I said, if you're interested in the course, go to writinglaunch.com, sign up for the wait list, and if you have any other questions, you can email us, you can comment, we're happy to answer all of the questions we can.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you to everyone who participated in the Q&A, and we're very happy with the turnout, and we're glad we could help everyone. And there is a link right below the YouTube video on the page to join the wait list, if that's something that you want to do. And we'll be sending out more information about the course soon if you want to learn more about that. And do keep an eye out on your email for the bonuses that were mentioned in the webinar, because we'll be sending those out over the next few days as well. Thank you, everyone.